Hi there, I'm Paige Finkelman. I'm at Cloud Connect, and I'm here with James Staten. He's the Vice President at Forrester Research, and he just finished up his keynote talk, and he's kind enough to spare a few minutes with me.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask you a couple questions, if that's okay.
Let's do it.
Cool. So real quick, perhaps you can tell everyone a little bit more about this analogy you painted for cloud computing. You know, I'm a big Michael Pollan fan, and I read Omnivore's Dilemma, and he said in his book that a lot of people ask him, what food should I be eating? What's the best thing for me? Which is really the wrong question to be asking. We should be asking, what's better for my wallet? What's better for my body? What's better for the environment? You know, just because this asparagus that came from Colombia out of season might be nutritious, it's expensive and there's a large carbon footprint, right? So you talked about buying a green car, and in fact, the greenest car that you could buy is the one you already have for manufacturing reasons and whatnot. And I love hearing all of the analogies within cloud computing, and perhaps you could share some of your favorites.
Sure. I mean, I like the green car one because so many people, to your point about what Michael Pollan always talks about, they just say, well, I've been told I need to get cloud, so I better go get cloud. It's like, well, why would you go get cloud when you don't actually know what you're asking and what you really want from that? You know, it's an analogy that we hear it in advertising for years about, you know, this is not your grandfather's blank, right? That's another one that applies here too, and I'm constantly telling people, you know, this, first of all, yeah, this is not your grandfather's data center. This is not your existing data center. This is a completely new and completely different. But at the same time, your grandfather's, that analogy sort of says, oh, it is what you know, but plus one. No, not true. Cloud is not plus one. Clouds are way more complicated, and you saw that in the New Starter presentation earlier today. And the companies that are really doing well here are the ones who actually learn the language. So we talk about, you know, if we want to really, you know, be in Rome, act like a Roman. Well, you gotta know what that means. You can't just like show up and say, well, you know, where's the tourist stand so I can get my pointy hat?
So I was at the Cloud Industry Summit yesterday, and you were one of the speakers there, and you gave a great talk. And one of the things you mentioned was that there's a really uneven handshake going on between cloud providers and customers, and that at some point the service does end and the customer has to be responsible for their end of the agreement. Can you perhaps share some key recommendations and things you feel that companies should consider when they're kind of going into an SLA or what have you?
Yeah, the first thing is to understand where is the point of abstraction that the service provider is actually taking over. Because where they stop taking over, that's entirely your responsibility. And that may be at the virtual machine, which means you're responsible for everything inside of that virtual machine. It may be that they take care of the middleware, but they don't take care of your application. And your application doesn't just sit on middleware. It usually calls other services and talks to other capabilities and has its own data and has to write data somewhere. And so you have to take responsibility for all of those processes. And you know, one thing we often think about is SLAs. We're like, well, you know, when I outsourced to EDS, they would give me an SLA, and it was sort of a blanket SLA and covered everything. Well, the clouds give you an SLA on the service they're providing, not your app on the service.
Yeah, it's an important differentiation to make. So on the topic of big data, something that's been talked about a lot at Cloud Connect, and you were in your talk, you mentioned that some of the value within big data is that you can connect kind of what's happened in the past to what's happening now, and through that you can mine data, create a more kind of informed business, and that all the trends will sort of percolate to the top. What other capabilities does big data have that perhaps we're not thinking about yet?
Well, most of what we've talked about with big data is sort of looking at click streams of sort of what is customer doing, which is sort of a consumer or retail point of view for doing things. What we really need to do is say, well, what happens if I actually combine that click stream data with my customer information data, my inventory system back here, and then maybe 2 or 3 streams of data from my partners. And when you combine all this data, you actually get a much richer understanding of what's actually going on. And this is something that I, for lack of a better term, I call Staten's theory. And it's very similar to Metcalfe's theory, which says the number of networks that are connected to each other increases the value of the network. The number of data streams that are connected together increases the value of any one piece of data. And that's a key analogy I want people to get and understand, because we have not done data commerce yet. We do it in certain industries and certain segments. So for example, if you were in Hollywood, DirecTV will tell you what people put on their DVR, whether they watch or not, and what they do. But what's more important is what else are they watching? is there a pattern here? And where are they fast forwarding? Are they fast forwarding through your ad but not through your competition's ad? All of this information becomes so much richer when you combine the rest of the data sets that are there. And that's what we need to see happen in big data. So right now we're kind of learning what it is, and then we'll move to the important stage. What can I do with it now that I know it?
Right, a larger, kind of more holistic look at all the streams coming in.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So my final question for you. During the Cloud Industry Summit yesterday, a gentleman from Dell had this great quote, and I just wanted to get your take on it. He said that the cloud is, what did he say? The cloud is the great leveler among businesses, the way the gun is a great leveler among men. Do you feel that that accurately describes this transformation we're going through at present?
To a degree. I'd actually say, so gun's actually an okay analogy. It's a leveler of those who actually know how to use it. You know, one of the things we talk about with any kind of tool out there is there's the presence of the tool and then there's the proper use of the tool. So if going back to the gun analogy, if I show I got a gun, you're going to behave a certain way, you're going to react a certain way.
Definitely.
But if I actually don't know what to do with it when I pull it out, you'll know that pretty quick, and then now the power's in your hands.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the difference we're going to see here. So while I agree that it does create a leveling in the sense that 5 really smart guys who understand the cloud can make the cloud do things that an enterprise might take years to do.
Right.
Clearly that's a leveling circumstance. But it really comes down to how deeply do you know it. And that's kind of the difference we've seen if you look at Netflix, for example, and what they've done to Blockbuster and what's happened in that market.
Right.
The reason they're actually moving forward now is because they've deeply understood the cloud and how to turn the economics to their advantage. And this is something that oftentimes people ignore too. They look at the cloud, and I brought this up in the keynote, and they see cost savings. You only get cost savings when you use the cloud right. If you just drop yourself into the cloud, it's actually more expensive.
Right. Well, James, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great.